Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast brought to you by SBM Intelligence, Nigeria's leading geopolitical platform. I'm your host, Judy Gaya, and every Saturday we look at some stories shaping our continent. Today we have a security analyst joining us to discuss a couple of issues, and she'll go ahead and introduce herself. Hello.
Yes, hello. I am Oluseyi Awojulugbe. I am an economy analyst senior analyst with SBM Intelligence. It's nice to be on the show.
Thank you for joining us, Sheyi. So first up, we have the Central Bank of Nigeria directing banks across the country to implement a 0.5% cybersecurity levy on all transactions, with exceptions outlined in a recent circular. But what exactly is a National Cybersecurity Fund, and why is its establishment coming amidst Nigeria's current economic challenges? We'll explore these and more. So, Sheyi, please, can you tell us more about the Cyber Protection Act, which was amended in February of 2014. Initially, the Cyber Protection Act was established in 2015. How did the law get passed without the knowledge of Nigerians? Because it seems like it's a shock to most people that there is a law that has been established to actually carry out the deduction or the charge on transactions for cybersecurity. So please, can you enlighten us on this?
All right. I'll start off to say that when it's electioneering season and citizens are all focused on who becomes the president, who becomes the governor, we usually hear campaigns advising people or encouraging people to also pay attention to who becomes senators and members of the House of Representatives, because those people are the ones who decide what bills are passed into law and, to some extent, the policy direction of any administration. And so that is what we have seen play out here. This bill was first introduced in 2015. At that time, it was called the Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention Act of 2015. And the aim at the time was to tackle cybercrime, cyber fraud within the banking sector, because as with Nigeria and with every other country on the continent, there is a problem of financial fraud or cyber fraud. And so this act was, at the time, one of the steps introduced to fight cyber fraud. However, to your question as to how that bill got passed into law without it being noticed by Nigerians, usually when a law is being deliberated on in the National Assembly, there is a room for a public hearing where citizens are encouraged to attend and make their reservations or give their input and contribute to the bill or the issue that's been discussed. However, this particular one went unnoticed because people do not really pay attention. And somehow it was also missed in the media that something like this was coming. It also does not help that the way the act was drafted, it only said that people will be charged 0.005. It didn't have a percentage. And so when the government or when the CBN decided to implement it, they just basically did 0.005 divided by 100, and that's how they got 0.5%. A layman who is reading the act would have probably thought it was 0.005 kobo. And now we can understand the difference between 0.005 kobo to be deducted from a bank account and 0.5% of any amount to be transferred. So first things first, people did not pay attention to the activities that are ongoing in the National Assembly. So that was how it went unnoticed. And if anyone had even noticed that particular bill whilst at the National Assembly, it could have been mistook for 0.005 kobo, not necessarily 0.5% of any amount to be transferred within bank accounts.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand you. Are you saying that presently, as is in the Act, it is 0.005 without the percentage written beside it? Or
Exactly.
Okay. So I get that point. Okay, so go on to the next question. What is the Cyber Security Fund meant for, and who would have oversight function of the Office of the National Security Advisor, seeing as the Office of the National Security Advisor is where this fund is meant to be domiciled, as well as administered by the National Security Advisor? Is there anyone overseeing the fund while it's parked at his office and its disbursement? Can you?
So okay, so let me just read out something and that was said when this bill was while this bill was at the National Assembly. So they said it was to help, this bill, or the target is to help to safeguard, protect, and defend national economic, political, and security infrastructure. That's it basically, and to help to realign with the national security policy and strategy on Nigeria's cyber threat profile. So basically, it's to protect the networks, the computer, communication, electronic communications, intellectual property, all of that, all those things around cybersecurity, including the banking network. However, it's surprising that rather than this cost, because for everything that has to be done within government, there's a cost attached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so rather than this cost to be borne by the government or to be borne by banks and telcos who make money from these infrastructure, right? Like the networks, the fiber networks and all of that within the country, the electronic infrastructure, with the network infrastructure within the country. These companies are the ones, including IT companies, they're the ones who make money off of this. So rather than these companies to be burdened with that levy, it has somehow come down, or it has been passed on to the consumer. And it's funny that this is coming at a time when Nigerians are dealing with food inflation as high as 40%. And fuel scarcity, insecurity, a lot of issues. And so people are wondering, why now? And that's the question we also have. Why now? Why is it at this point? Why is it to be borne by the customer, not by the people who are making profits and declaring huge profits off of this network infrastructure? Why does it have to be borne by the consumer? So those are the questions that we have. And with the outrage so far, I expect that the government will maybe reconsider, maybe go back to the drawing board, but that remains to be seen.
Okay, so let's circle back to where you mentioned that the cybersecurity fund is meant to protect political and economic interests of the country. Let's focus on the economic interests of the country. Are there other, for instance, I believe that banks and ICT companies equally have ways of securing their networks from cyber attacks. So isn't that duplication of function? So the commercial banks and other banks are already protecting their networks. The ICT companies are equally spending money to do the same thing. And now they're charging Nigerians and bank Nigerians, not all Nigerians, but just those who use the bank for the cybersecurity levy to also do the same thing.
Let me explain it like this. Yes, banks and telcos and IT companies, and I want to say the government, but a look at the 2024 budget and cybersecurity was only mentioned twice in the entire budget document. So I don't think I can necessarily say the government is spending money to secure their networks. However, there is a gap. Everyone is doing it in silos. So the banks are trying to do theirs on their own. Telcos are trying to do theirs on their own. IT companies are doing that on their own. So there is no coordination in the fight against cybercrime.
So rather than
now, for that to be
no, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, rather than charge Nigerians to do this, can't the government implore on them to actually harmonize it?
Yes, so that's a strategy. So that's a strategy that could have worked. However, to the way with government, to get anything done, then there has to be committees and white papers, and they have to purchase equipment and appoint people. And all these activities will be funded by something. And that is where that levy now comes in. So maybe this is a method that they can still use, but right now what I was trying to say is that right now everyone is working in silos, and between 2019 and 2023, the amount lost to fraud in Nigeria's banking system has risen from 2.9 billion in 2019 to over 17 billion in 2023. Now, that shows you the scale of fraud that is going on. The amount of money, the sheer amount of money lost to fraud. In 2023 alone, over 17 billion was lost to fraud within the Nigerian banking sector. So, and there was also an incident where a major telco last year had a glitch, and then customers were seeing that their debt had been wiped off and all of that. Do you understand? So because there is no coordination, and the government has decided that, okay, we want to have a coordinated response against fraud. And where is a majority of this going on? Is going on in the banks, and that's the banks is where the money is. So we can take a portion of it, basically. But rather than now charge the banks, or rather than remove it from existing taxes, maybe say a portion of VAT or a portion of stamp duty, anything or any other levy or tax that is being borne by Nigerians this levy could have been funded by any of these other taxes. But rather, the government has decided to add another layer of levy or another layer of taxes to the burden that Nigerians already bear.
Okay. You touched on the last question I was going to ask, which is, can funding be gotten from anywhere else rather than task Nigerians who are already burdened by economic hardship? Right? I see you already touched on that. So we'll move on to the next story. Ikeja Electric Distribution Company has announced a surprising reduction in electricity tariffs from Band A customers. defying the regulatory guidelines set by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. We'll delve into the factors behind this decision, its implications for electricity access and affordability, and how it intersects with broader government policies. Could you enlighten us on the factors that led to Ikeja Electric's decision to reduce the electricity tariff for Band A customers from 225 naira per kilowatt to 206.80 kilo, I'll take that again. From 225 kilowatts, I'll take that again. From 225 naira per kilowatt to 206 naira 80 kobo per kilowatt.
So when let me just give a brief foundation so that we can understand how Nigeria's power sector works.
Okay.
After it was unbundled, you have the Gencos who are in charge of generating electricity. They do that by whether using gas, whether using water, and a bit of solar. There's also a bit of solar in the mix. Now, gas, which is a major part of that circle, is paid for in dollars. And so when the power is generated, it stops at the NBET. NBET is the bulk electricity trading company that sort of buys off all of the power from the Gencos, and then NBET passes it on to the discos. So, and the problem before NBET was created was that Gencos were complaining that if they give discos, let's say, for example, 10,000 naira worth of electricity, if they generate 10,000 naira worth of electricity, because of some issues, including poor infrastructure and even inefficiencies on the part of the discos, at the end of the day, only about 8,000 or 7,000 is distributed to the customer. That's 3,000 naira lost already. Mm-hmm. Now, when the discos distribute 7,000 or 8,000 naira worth of electricity to customers, you have people that are owing their electricity bills that are not paying up. And so the discos at the end of the day will only get about 5,000 naira. And they are remitting 5,000 naira to a Genco that dispersed to them or distributed to them 10,000 naira worth of electricity. You can see that there's a shortfall already. So that was why NBET was created, so that NBET can guarantee payment for the Gencos, the generation companies. And now, along the line, we had the naira devaluation that caused the exchange rate to skyrocket, if I may use that word.
Yeah.
And so now Gencos were saying that their costs have increased because they are buying gas in dollars. And so those and the other issues around the government was already subsidizing electricity for the customers and all of that. The term they usually use is cost-reflective tariffs. So the discos said they were not making profits because the government did not allow them to charge customers as they are supposed to. And so those are all the factors that led to the increase in Band A tariffs, as we saw. Already, some discos already had these premium arrangements. I know for sure for Ikeja Electric that they have these arrangements where people pay more for better power supply, better electricity supply. So now, what Ikeja Electric is saying is that, well, because the exchange rate as Naira has achieved some stability in recent times, they are also willing to cut back or reduce the tariff that are paid by customers. Judy, are you there? Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. I wanted to interject here. I wanted to ask you, or let me ask, does that mean that if the cost of the naira or the price of the naira fluctuates once more, the cost of electricity is likely to go up?
Maybe. So now this is what happens in a deregulated sector, and this is what we hope would also happen in the oil and gas sector with subsidy removal, so that each company can determine what they want to charge customers. So since there is already a ceiling of 224 naira per kilowatt, then if the naira for any reason depreciates further, then Ikeja Electric can say that they are going back to charging customers that 224.
Okay. Okay. So that point is clear. How does the reduction in tariff for Band A customers align with the government's policies or objective regarding access to electricity, as well as affordability?
So, Ikeja Electric services only a portion of Lagos State and maybe some neighboring towns. So, the impact may not be felt, the impact of this reduction in tariff will certainly not be felt across the country because of Ikeja Electric's service areas. And we have about 11 discos. So the odds are, the percentage or the ratio is really low if 1 out of 11 is reducing its tariff.
Okay,
I think that they just want to be, they just want to stand out, if I may put it like that. And usually, Ikeja Electric is like the best student in class, if I'm allowed to say that, amongst all the other discos, because according to NERC data, in February 2024, the Ikeja Electric was supposed to generate a revenue of 17 billion naira, 17.08 billion naira. That's for the electricity that was given to them. And then Ikeja Electric raked in about 19 billion, 19.5 billion to be exact. And so they said, and that was because they got some of their outstanding bills, the bills from the outstanding month. So their collection efficiency in February was over 100%.
Okay.
So the closest to it is Eco Electric, Eco Disco, who also services Nigeria and Lagos, the other part of Lagos, and their collection efficiency was 99%. So you can say that these guys are really like the outliers in the power sector generally.
Okay, so it's safe to say that other discos wouldn't be following suit in reducing the cost of the tariff for their Band A customers. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I said, is it safe to say that other discos wouldn't be following suit in reducing the cost of electricity tariffs for their Band A customers?
I do not anticipate that, especially when you take a disco like Yola Disco that only has a collection efficiency of 48%. The more money they make, the faster they can recover whatever investment they've put in. So for any business that is trying to recover its investments, they may not necessarily be looking at reducing tariffs.
Okay. So in a related story, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has ordered the system operator, a department within the Transmission Company of Nigeria, to cap power supply to cross-border customers in Benin Republic, Niger, and Togo. So how do you think this directive from the Nigerian Electricity Commission, Regulatory Commission, to cap power supply to neighboring countries relates to the domestic tariff adjustments made by Ikeja Electric? Is there any relationship?
So that decision to cap electricity exports to neighboring countries, um, would it be related? Not exactly, but on a general basis, if so now, because as I said earlier, these discos, there are also businesses who are trying to recoup their investments. So I think that what the NERC has found is that some companies may find it easier to export electricity to neighboring countries because they have better transmission or better distribution infrastructure than Nigeria. So their transmission lines are better. And so they would not have cases of energy losses. So maybe these discos are trying to use it as shortcuts to recoup their investment. So with the NERC putting a cap on electricity exports, it just means that they would have no choice than to make that electricity available to customers in Nigeria. Because one thing about this kind of electricity that is that it cannot be stored. It's not like power generated via solar, where you have a battery and then you can store it for later use. The kind of power that electricity that is generated via gas, it can't be stored, so it must be used up. So if the discos cannot export it to the neighboring countries, then they have no choice but to make it available within the country.
Okay. One question I want to ask is relating to politics, or the politics of this directive by the regulatory body. Do you see it affecting bilateral relations between Nigeria and Benin Republic, for instance? Because in Benin Republic, power shortages have led to protests by citizens. So do you see this affecting Nigeria's relationship with Benin Republic or the other countries, Niger and Togo?
Maybe to some extent, maybe. And as we've seen, even when Nigeria had the border closure issue some years back, I expect that the leadership of these countries will try to negotiate, or like we've seen in the case of Niger, they may look towards other sources to generate or to get the electricity that their population needs.
Okay.
So it may not necessarily affect diplomatic relations between both countries or between Nigeria and these countries, but I expect that there would be some negotiations to resolve it, or to make Nigeria reconsider its stance.
Okay. One last question relating to this story is Nigeria. I know that Nigeria exports electricity, or Nigeria's export of electricity to Benin Republic is a revenue earner, a huge revenue earner. How do you think this affects us, considering that we kind of need all the cash we can get into the economy, and we're reducing supply of electricity to that country?
So yes, you're right that it's a revenue generation source. However, what do we see of a revenue generation source that has legacy debts? All these countries owe Nigeria substantial amounts of money for electricity that has already been consumed. So I'm sure that those are some of the factors that the NERC considered to say if this is supposed to be generating revenue for the country or for the sector. And instead, what we have is a certain percentage of debt, then I think it would be better to allow Nigerian citizens enjoy their electricity.
Okay.
Do you understand? Especially now that there is a arrangement where discos must supply 20 hours. So you know that people who were living in Bande areas who were previously enjoying between 10 and 15 hours of power supply now have to get an extra 5 to 10 hours of supply. So that's more demand within Nigeria already. So I think that the NERC would have met with the discos and said, well, if we're not able to recoup the money for the electricity that we have supplied to these neighboring countries, increase tariffs in the country, then let's allow people within the country enjoy this electricity rather than export it to other countries.
Okay, thank you, Shay, for shedding light on this issue. So finally, we turn our attention to Togo, where President Faure Gnassingbe has signed a controversial new constitution that eliminates presidential elections. What does this mean for Togo's political sphere, and how do these developments reflect wider trends in African governments? So, Sheyi, can you, dissect this issue for us? How does this controversial constitution, or this new controversial constitution, reflect on governance in Togo?
Yes, so SBM Intelligence published a report, not so recent, last year, 2023, November, around the risk. The name of the report is the African Country Instability Risk Report. And that report looked at how would you rate the African economies, African countries, how would you rate them? Are they of risk of instability? And in that report, Togo was ranked as fragile. There was a warning regarding Togo. And in the report, we highlighted that Togo is an autocracy. It's a multi-party democracy only in name. And it has been ruled by one family for years. So President Gnassingbe, if I'm correct, President Gnassingbe has been in power since 2005. He's been president since 2005. In 2025, that would mean 20 years of him being president. And now he has signed a new constitution. He has introduced a new tenure for the presidential term. Generally, this speaks to the trends that we have seen within the region, or should I say within the sub-region, with the coup in Niger, with what we have going on in Guinea and Mali. So these things just show that when it comes to democracy, maybe there's still a lot more to be done to convince African leaders that it's okay to be out of office and not in power.
Okay. Okay, so what has been the response of the opposition party and citizens to this development? And do they hold any weight in the grand scheme of things?
Well, there's been some protests from citizens and the opposition. Well, in the last election, the opposition basically boycotted the last election. We've seen where that has led. The President Gnassingbe, basically had a landslide victory at the polls as a result of that. Yes. So there's been some protests. Would it hold weight? I'm not sure. But I think that we do not expect any opposition from ECOWAS because of any other external or foreign body, because Togo has been a major supporter of ECOWAS's actions and moves. And so, except things degenerate to the level of a coup, I do not think that ECOWAS will say anything on the matter. Rather, we think that they would look away and turn the other eye.
But doesn't that encourage other countries or leaders of other countries to do the same thing, seeing as there are no repercussions for such actions?
Well, it's a dicey situation, because as much as bodies like ECOWAS or the UN can advise, and that's the word, they can only advise. If they try to impose sanctions, like we saw in the case of Niger, where ECOWAS tried to impose sanctions on Niger, those sanctions were later lifted without any repercussions. It speaks to the context that African countries find themselves in, that a lot of so-called democracies in Africa are being led by one party or one family or one individual for several years. And these countries say that they are practicing democracy. What is democracy? So I was saying that it speaks to the kind of context that African countries have found themselves in. As I said earlier at the beginning of my comments, there needs to be a substantial level of work to be done to help African leaders know that it is okay not to be in power. It is okay not to be in control. It's for the good of the country when everyone gets a chance to play a role or partake in the administration and in the development of a country. So the silence or the perceived silence from ECOWAS and other international bodies, would it encourage others? Perhaps. It's not likely, but perhaps it may. But it just goes with everybody just understands the flow of how the democracies work in Africa.
Okay. Thank you, Sheyi, for being a part of today's episode and enlightening us on various issues that affect Nigeria and the continent as a whole. And to all our listeners, this podcast is made possible by SBM Intelligence, Nigeria's leading geopolitical platform. For deeper insights into our work, visit our website at www.sbmintelligence.com. And don't forget to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.